Baltimore announces that all failed public school kids last year would nevertheless be promoted to the next grade this year with no further consequences. And why not? After all, the teachers who failed to teach them and the administrators who abandoned them all got fat union raises for their failures. You gotta love education in big Democrat cities. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is In Your Face Dr. Duke Show, coming for you, Baltimore. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We are the only program that keeps you educated in the craziest investigative classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by the great Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. For more than 15 years, MyPillow has been producing the most comfortable in the world. In fact, they've sold over 40 million MyPillows. In addition, MyPillow also sells bed sheets, towels, bathrobes, dog beds. Goes on and on. Our audience can save up to 66% on all of this by simply using the access code at the website Dr. Duke. Go to the MyPillow website and enter Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E, and you get all of that wonderful savings at MyPillow.com. Support a great American company, save big money, and sleep really well. Sleep the sleep of the angels. So again, to use the code Dr. Duke, save up to 66% and help this show get even more muscular than it is right now. Got to deal with Baltimore here. I mean, inner city schools, a beautiful city that has been destroyed by nonstop progressive leadership for a long time now. You got to this is the same school district that about 6 months ago we did a story about a young boy who had a .130 grade point average, who made it from freshman year to high school senior with only passing 2 of his classes. Remember that?
And
same Baltimore, right?
And he ranked at like the top half of the class.
He was in the top
50%
GPA of the other kids. And so now this, my friends, when you hear the word inclusion, especially when it comes out of liberal mouths and especially when it deals with education, this is what it means. Everyone must be included in graduation. Everybody must be allowed to proceed from one grade to the other. Everybody ought to get ahead every year, whether they fail or not. Because if you fail a kid and require him to stay back a year, socially and culturally and psychologically, you're not including him. So ignore grades, ignore hard work, ignore attendance, ignore competence, ignore literacy, and simply for the sake of inclusion, keep pushing these kids, ignorant though they may be, completely failed, never attending class students. They get to move forward, because to do the opposite would be to fail to include them.
So Baltimore City Public Schools announced this just recently, that yes, we are not going to hold our students back if they have failed. It's their new grading policy, and it's going to enable students, again.
Excuse me. It's not a grading policy. It's a not grading. It's a
that's
not
what they're
grading.
calling it,
This
a
is our
grading policy.
new not grading policy.
Even if you failed a class, you still may
So
collect, go Pasco or
collect your $200.
Go Pasco,
Can I ask you a
whatever.
question, Katie?
You may pass.
How come these people never want to work to include people in the category of literate? How come these liberals don't want to include kids in the category of math competent? How come that kind of inclusion doesn't work?
It doesn't play along with the narrative.
Because to make kids math and literate and math competent means that you would spend all your time teaching subject matter instead of this hackneyed old critical race theory.
And then they would use their brains, and they may actually fight back against you.
And then you might actually get jobs. I get it. Yeah,
okay.
I see. The racket only survives with ignorance.
So following the narrative, of course, the school district is using the excuse of COVID for why, kids, they had a rough year, which they did. But that means they have no responsibility, apparently, because
of course not.
They are calling, the chief academic officer, Joanne Dabrowski, called this new approach a way to avoid the punitive approach of failing students.
Right. So kids failed.
Have no
autonomy. Can I parse her logic?
Yes, you can.
If we failed kids, we will be failing them. And we will be reifying failure at the expense of inclusion.
Yes, and your words almost sound like the racist Dr. Seuss, so we can't have you speak.
Could not read in the house. He could not read with a mouse. Could
Well,
not read with his pants on.
according to Baltimore City Public Schools CEO, the fact that you have a CEO of a public schools, one of these things is not like the other. Sonia Santelices, not quite sure how her name is pronounced, but that's
Pretty
okay.
sure Sonia did not get a cut and pay for her inability to teach. But she got a big fat raise.
Yeah. Did you want to know how much money?
How much raise did she get for failing to educate people distantly over COVID?
Yes. So now she was the district's highest paid employee, which she's CEO. She was making $339,000 a year. $339,000 per year. And that is a $22,000 raise from just 3 years ago.
Nice.
So she's gotten, I don't know what the breakdown is, but each year she's getting a little bit more.
So-
$339,000.
So may I use an analogy?
I didn't even get to say what she said yet.
May I use an analogy?
When
I think of CEO, I think of somebody like the CEO of Coca-Cola. Can you imagine if the CEO of Coca-Cola had a year where 72% of Coke cans of Coke were empty? 72% of the cans and bottles of Coke that were supposed to be bottled were empty and sold. 72%. And for that, the CEO got a $22,000 raise.
Over the course of 3 years, yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
For selling empty bottles. Because those kids are empty bottles.
Because Coca-Cola would do the same thing our friend Sonia is doing and put some spin on this. As Sonia explains, this is not about a failure, but it is about unfinished learning and giving multiple opportunities, multiple on-ramps for young people to complete that learning.
Do you really think that
No.
giving them on-ramps without any off-ramps, that there's nothing that they can do to actually not be on that road? That the kids have no responsibility in any of this. The families have no responsibility. The schools have no responsibility. These are just kids who weren't ready yet to imbibe our wisdom.
And, using their speak, where normally you would get an F. You failed, F. Simple. You know what you're getting there. Instead, it's going to be a no credit.
NC.
And for students who are in 2nd through 8th grade, unsatisfactory or fail instead will be not completed. Because
the old incomplete.
As Dabrowski explained, in all of these instances, we want to emphasize the word yet. Not completed yet. No credit yet.
323. Hey, CEO worth $322K a year for failure. Can I ask you a question? When you push them from 8th grade to 9th grade, require nothing of them, they're going to be. How are you not destining them to greater failure? Because that's one level higher of work they're not prepared for. How are you not dooming them?
And now you may be thinking at home, well, most kids did just fine. They're resilient. They got through it. They're passing all their classes.
Resilient.
But
all that means is they can sit in front of a TV screen for a long time.
Can you let me finish?
Are you ready to finish?
So, Mom and Dad and Dr. Duke apparently. Here's what's happening in Baltimore, because you have to remember this is Baltimore, where 63% of middle and high school students are failing at least one class.
Yep.
And this is according to their own data, Baltimore City Public Schools, and that's nearly 25,000 students out of nearly 40,000 6th through 12th graders in the district. And even more worrying, as the article notes, 51% of students in grades 2 to 5 and 37% of kindergarten and first graders fail at least one course during their school year. Now, how can in elementary school you have in K through 1 out of every 3 kids, and then the higher elementary grades, 1 out of every 2 students failing something? How is that even possible?
Because failure is just one more thing that we have to be inclusive about. These are inclusive failures, Katie, and as such, it is the definition of what schools are. It's impossible to include everybody in high successful grades, but you can include the entire school in failure, starting with that great big fat CEO salary that went up, not down, in spite of these numbers.
Well, as often has become the case in these past few weeks, we have another mom who is fighting back for transparency in schools, and she's taken it to the system. We have Nicole Salas, who decided that she was going to request a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, for information from her kindergarten daughter's school in South Kingston, Rhode Island. And for doing so, for wanting to be a mom and wanting to get information and know what her kindergarten daughter is going to be taught, she faces potentially a lawsuit. How is that possible? We'll explain. Well, according to Mom, she says she wanted to speak out to fight for her daughter's education, and she says she's in a special position. I don't have a job to lose because I'm a stay-at-home mom. My daughter is just starting out in school. So if I have to send her to a private school, I will. Let's listen to Mom.
I enrolled my daughter in the school. I wanted to know if they were doing anything with gender theory or anti-racism. I called the principal, and I was told that they don't refer to kids as boys and girls. They have a common practice of doing this. I was also told that they refrain from using gender terminology in general. In terms of anti-racism, I was told that kids in kindergarten are asked what could have been done differently at Thanksgiving. And this struck me as a way to shame children for their American heritage. When I asked more questions, I wasn't really getting clear or meaningful answers. And so I said, well, let me see the curriculum. I got a lot of runaround. I couldn't see the curriculum in school. I asked for a tour. I still haven't had a tour after over 30 days later. And finally, the principal and the school committee told me to submit a public records request, which is called an APRA request. That stands for Access to Public Records Act. The school district has a link on their website where you can go and type in the documents that you want to see.
So as you heard, she was told to request through the Access to Public Records Act to get the information. So she did. 160 of them to be exact. But she argues, the mom argues, that under the state law, the filings actually constitute, even though she had 160, as just being one because she filed it within the same 30-day period. And this is where this potential lawsuit comes in, is the South Kingston School Committee had at the board meeting an agenda item called discussion/action on filing lawsuit against Solis to challenge filing of over 160 APRA requests.
I'll say this. So again, do you see where we are now, Mom and Dad? This is what marks the radical departure from even the Common Core world. Because in the Common Core world, they really didn't want your involvement, but they were not at the point yet where they told you to buzz off. They were not at the point yet where they lied to your faces. Honestly, if I were this wonderful mom who is going to put her kid apparently in a private school, hopefully she will, but at least the option is in her head. From the very first conversation heard that we don't refer to boys and girls as boys and girls, that would have been enough for me. You would not have had to go any further. I would not have had to have a tour of your building. I would not have required to see your curriculum. That attitude with a parent would have been enough for me.
But I think this kind of highlights a little interesting fact of what more parents should be doing, because what the left has done this entire time is pick at you and pick at you and pick at you and not go away and not go away and keep fighting and keep fighting. We need to do the same thing. If you care about your kids and want this to finally at some point all go away, you need to fight back and keep fighting and not just hide in a corner, because the left isn't hiding in a corner. They're coming out of the corner. So you need to do what this mom did by filing this it's a simple request. They even look on your own school's website that you could file a request and actually find out what is being taught in your kid's school. And here's where it gets interesting. According to the mom, she again says that she was following exactly what she was supposed to. She talked to lawyers, and even these lawyers can't figure out what the school's trying to do. But what the school's trying to do after delaying everything and trying to avoid the whole topic, they're going to charge her an exorbitant amount of money. Now they're trying to do that to dissuade her from actually doing this. She said she started using the APRA request Google link on the school district's website to request the public documents about all of her concerns. And then she requested it, and the school committee came back that they were going to charge her $9,570. And she says, who can afford that? And that's the point.
This is the exact same thing they do at colleges when conservative speakers come. They don't want to give a permit, then they have to give a permit in the name of free speech. Then they say, well, if you come, you're going to have your own security guards because it's going to be dangerous. And we won't let you come and speak, Ben Shapiro, unless you cough up $40,000 for security. Same thing here, right? You want these you're the one, public school, who told me to do an Open Records Act. I've done it legally. And now, rather than giving my information, you're going to charge me $10,000 $100,000 for clerical reasons. All this should tell you everything you need to know, mom and dad. They don't want you involved, and they don't want your kids involved. They don't want you messing around here. They're not your kids. Explain to me just this one question. If you can answer this one question, I'll drop the issue. Give me one reason why you would call these schools public still. Why? They don't belong to the public in any way, any meaningful way, shape, or form. They are not public schools. They are government internment camps where your kids go to learn things that you will never see, to be taught things that you couldn't possibly agree with, to be redirected, reprogrammed, reinitiated, to be a completely different kind of kid than your kid would be raised if you were allowed to be its parent. And the only reason you keep doing this is because you think you got to send your kid to public schools. You have a very serious lesson in front of you, ma'am. I have every faith that you will now remove your child from that environment forever and find a safe educational place for her.
And now we have an elementary school principal who started using kind of some terminology that maybe one of her students would use, saying, wackos and pushy. And this woman is calling that to the parents as being wackos and pushy for simply questioning the all non-inclusive critical race theory. And like a little kid may do, then she says, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. But it was actually through a Freedom of Information Act request. Again, a FOIA. People, look them up. You can do them. The Young America's Foundation reported that they got some internal emails from the Desert Valley Elementary School, which is in Glendale, Arizona. The principal, named Tonya Nevi, that targeted nearly 12 parents who decided to speak up and out at a December 10th school board meeting in opposition to the proposed CRT curriculum. Let's listen. What's the wackos and the pushy people? What are they actually saying? Let's listen to them.
When you peel back the layers of this onion, you will see that it promotes taking from one group in order to compensate a second group, to correct injustices caused by a third group who mistreated a fourth group by an earlier point in history. It's absurd. Not only does it not promote justice, it does the opposite. It promotes racism.
The recent events have brought to light the failure of our education system. The young people we witnessed rioting and looting in some of our largest cities came out of an education system that had taught them to hate America.
I'd rather empower people in minority groups to rise above and not do anything that's going to create a victim mentality, that if you're born a certain way, that you're now not afforded the same options in our country.
And all those parents, God bless them, they're sitting there, they got their masks on, they've shown up in force, and I guarantee you there's not a single word registering with your school board. There's not one of those radical progressives who did this to your kid who are going to do the singlest little thing to remunerate your difficulties. There's nothing, and not a thing.
Yeah, but the principal clearly heard all those words because she decided to write in an email. That board meeting was ridiculous. I'm sick of us giving these wackos a platform to spread propaganda without making any correction statements. Yeah, I mean, they were wackos. That's when I was listening. That's all I just heard wackos and pushy.
Yeah, they were very rational. They were very measured. I go back to the previous story where they were talking about where the mom said in Rhode Island, that they were teaching our kids as young as elementary school about what could have been done better at the first Thanksgiving. Look, the first Thanksgiving went really well. Native Americans and the new Americans from Europe sat down, they ate together, they exchanged bread, they prayed together. You're telling me that's wrong? That you have to rewrite that? What would you have expected? That the founding fathers groveled at the feet of the Native Americans, worshiped them like gods? What would you have them? That's all you need to know. And so this principal here, all she can do is malign them on her email account.
Of course. Well, she was emailing one of the people who is the architect of their CRT curriculum. And in another email, she had said, this is the case Ashley was referring to. Administration has some control to quiet those pushy voices, because they're pushy voices at these board meetings. Parents, how dare you? Well, the Peoria Unified School District spokeswoman, because everyone has a spokeswoman now or a spokesman, said the district didn't know about the principal's comments. And then here comes the always and so sincere apology. My comments were unprofessional, and I apologize for that. My comments were in regards to audience members who were coming to our board and calling teachers out by name and misconstruing and devaluing the hard work they do. My comment was made in the heat of the moment. Again, this was an email. Heat of the moment, and in defense of my profession and colleagues.
So basically, you're not sorry.
Sorry,
You're not sorry. You're
Hashtag.
not. You just used the wrong. One of those heated email sessions, right? Where after you got home, you had a gin and tonic. You're sitting there in your bathrobe. You get on there, and all of a sudden, in a moment of just absolute rage, out comes the truth.
Heat of the moment.
Devaluing my teachers. You should be devaluing. They called you out for what you're doing. You couldn't be bothered to answer them. And why, Mrs. Neff? Why couldn't you just look them in the eye and said, I think you're a bunch of wackos? Why the email? The email was calculated. You couldn't wait to get away from them, so you could wink, wink, email all the apparatchiks on the school board saying, don't worry, they're wackos. We don't have to do anything.
And it doesn't really matter because she's already taking another principal job in New Hampshire. And the thing is, she was only principal there from April 2020 to now. So she made it 1 year.
And the sad thing is, it's
can
promotable.
Get rid of those wackos.
The fact that you call parents out like that is a promotable thing in today's public school system. It is not a hindrance. It's a help. And here we are. It's time for some real education. It's time for, I said it again, real education. The immortal words of Ronald Reagan, our 40th president, the Gipper, the very genial actor of the 1930s and 40s and 50s who became really competent and admirable and all-around leader in the White House. So let's look at some of the words, the really fascinating words of Ronald Reagan. How about this quote? Within the covers of the Bible are the answers for all the problems men face. He's exactly right. There is no problem that human beings face that cannot be answered somewhere in the cover pages of the Bible. That book is universal. How about this quote? There is no limit to the amount of good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. Let your enemies who are lesser men than you claim victory because you got them to compromise the right way. That's fine. There is no limit to the amount of good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. How about this quote? As government expands, liberty contracts. Let them be a mantra. Let them be your mantra, right? As government expands, liberty contracts. And how about the next one? The most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. When you hear that, you could be up to your neck in flood water. You could have a tornado that's blown the roof right off your house and standing in a blaze of fire in your living room. And when you open the door looking for help, somebody says, I'm from the government, close the door and take on the tornado and the fire yourself. It'll be a much less strenuous way to go. And finally, how about this beautiful quote? Christmas can be celebrated in the schoolroom with pine trees and tinsel, reindeers, but there must be no mention of the man whose birthday is being celebrated. One wonders how a teacher would answer if a student asked, why is it called Christmas? You wonder, what would they say? They couldn't bring themselves to mention the name Christ, could they?
All right, those are the stories for today. If you have a question for us, please feel free to drop it in the mailbag by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org. And if you enjoy our content, please support our show and join the Patriot Club. Your one-time $99 tax-deductible donation keeps us going. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And of course, as a special thank you, we will send you our red signature tumbler.
And that wraps up the show for Freedom Project. I'm Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends, and buy some MyPillow for the cause.